Hello, if you follow my channel, you know that most of the time I work on European cars. Jaguar, Land Rover, Audi, Volkswagen, Porsche, BMW. This is not a European car, this is a 2018 Jeep Wrangler JL, and it needs some help. Okay, so what's going on with this thing? Originally, it was losing a little bit of coolant out of the reservoir over there. Didn't see any on the ground, anything of that nature. As the weeks went by, started getting a misfire. We got 3 codes right now. We got 171 for System 2 Lean, Bank 1. Bank 1 is the passenger side, right-hand side of this engine. It should be 135246. And what else? P0300, random cylinder misfire, multiple cylinder misfire. And 137, it's an O2 sensor, low voltage. I think that's the downstream cat, so that's a little strange, but I don't know. We'll dive into that a little bit more later. What we do know is we've done a combustion gas test on this, and it looks to have some combustion gas in here. Let me zoom in on this for you. So you can see that this is really light in color. Now I know that this bottle is bigger than this, but this fluid should be this nice dark blue color, and it's not. If I put a flashlight behind it here, it is like yellowish green, and this of course is a nice blue. That this should be the same, and it's not. Basically what you do is you just fill this thing up with some of that fluid. Got it a little bit full, but no big deal. And you put it in here, and you just squeeze this a few times and suck in some of the airspace of your reservoir, and wait a little bit. It should stay blue. You should never have any combustion gas inside of the coolant system. It should stay that nice blue color, and it's not. It's changing color. So we got a head gasket leak. We're gonna just replace both head gaskets because, well, we're in there. Let's do it. To get started, this thing is tall and hard to reach over and get to things, so I'm gonna do a few extra things just to make life easier for me. I'm going to remove the front bumper, the front grille, the front radiator support, and the radiator. We're gonna get down so we can see the engine. There are multiple videos on replacing the bumper, or taking it off, and the grille and taking it off. So I'm not going to show that. Once we get down towards the radiator, I'll start filming again. Okay, got the front bumper off and the grille off. Now I'm going to take this front radiator support off, along, I think with the headlights with it. I don't know how to do this, so I'm going to figure it out and then tell you how I got it off. I'm going to take the air cleaner off next, though, because there are some other connections that are hard to get to, like this fan connection right here, that I believe needs to come with the core support up here. Anyway, I'm going to work on getting this off, and then I'll explain it further. Okay, there's the front radiator support, down and out. Not too terribly difficult. I'll go from the driver's side over here. Pull this yellow tab up, lift this connection out, set it off to the side. You've got 2 13mm bolts here. Pay attention to this hole right here. I'll explain it later. Then down here you got 4 bolts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are these 4 bolts here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you go to the other side. It's the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are the bolts right there. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then up here you got 2 13mm bolts. Again, I'll talk about this hole in just a second. Those are those bolts right here. Alright, after that is done, make sure you got the 8mm bolts off the top here. This side, and then there's one on the other side. I still got it sticking in right here. And then what you do is you lift up on the whole piece. These pins right here, these guide pins, are pretty deep, probably like 1.5 inches. Those go inside of that center hole right there and on the other side. So I lifted up one side and moved it forward. Got this wiring harness, these fir trees out, and unplugged the headlight. And same thing on this side. Lifted it up, and unplug the headlight. Then you just got to kind of lift the radiator up and back to get it out of the pockets. There's two pockets right here and right here that it sits on the back side of this support right here and right here. I mean, the book will probably tell you to take the radiator out first, but this is actually pretty simple. Oh, hey, one last important thing that I forgot to mention. These cross brackets here, these are T30. I don't think you have to remove this one. I did, but remove this one. And then underneath it, you'll see a T20 Torx right here and another one right here. This piece needs to come with this, at least this side, or needs to detach from right here. But now it is time to drain the radiator, the coolant system. I'm going to discharge the air conditioning. Then we're going to disconnect all the hoses and get this whole radiator, condenser, fan, everything out as one unit. Okay, the radiator and condenser are off. I opted to just put the trans cooler unbolted with two 8mm bolts. You lift it out of this side, there's an 8mm bolt up here, and then on the side, you just lift it up and move it off to the side like over there. I'll probably wrap a towel around it just to protect it as I work on this here. And then as far as the radiator goes, there's a drain down here on the bottom. You just turn it and it unscrews and it'll start draining. I had a bucket that I just caught the fluid in. And then discharge the AC system. What is it, 1234 or 1234 YF, whatever that is, the new stuff. Discharge that and unbolted the lines over here on the side of the condenser. Remove the reservoir overflow hose, the upper radiator hose, and then I leaned the unit back and got to the lower radiator hose here. In retrospect, it probably would have been easier to pull it off right there. But all of these hoses are going to come off anyway to get to this side, bank one cylinder head. All right, next I'm going to take the vacuum pump off. I'm going to opt to take off as much as possible, so I'm just going to unplug it right here, undo the bracket from the bracket, and then undo the line on the throttle body right here, and unplug it from the brake booster back there, and take the line, the pump, the bracket, whole thing off at once. Okay, the vacuum pump is off. This alternator is just screaming, remove me. It's just right here in front of me, so I'm going to do that next. Negative battery terminal of the battery is going to be removed. It looks like a 10mm bolt over there. Loosen that, pull that off. Unplug the alternator. So we got 4 bolts here for this alternator on the bracket. And then underneath here there'll be a main power lead for the alternator. Remove all that stuff and get the alternator off. Oh, of course you're going to have to remove the belt. Looks like we got to put a tool in here, release tension of the belt, and then we'll pull the alternator off. Okay, the alternator is out. There's 2 bolts right here, 13mm, and then above them there's 2 15mm bolts. A word of caution, those 15mm bolts, they're long. They're these guys right here, one on each side. I had to actually use a breaker bar to get these loose. These things are really tight in there. And as I was pulling the alternator out, I saw a little spark as this hit the side of the alternator. So I'm like, what the heck? And I forgot that these things have an aux battery. And the auxiliary battery is incredibly hard to get to. I'm not going to go over each step. There's plenty of videos on how to replace this on the Jeep Wranglers. But essentially, the short version is 7mm bolts. 4 of those after you lift the cover off. And then as you lift these off, you're going to have to probably pry some of these plugs out. Those 7mm bolts go into these plugs here on the bottom. Then once this is up and out of the way, you got 4 10mm bolts on a cover. I'm touching it, this cover right here. And then you pull this cover up, and then underneath it is the aux battery. I have just disconnected the negative terminal on that. Holy cow. We still have some stuff that we're going to pull off the front of the engine here, like all these coolant hoses. But in an effort to get all of these hoses off with breaking the least amount of connections as possible and taking it off in the biggest chunks as possible, we need to get this intake off next. So a couple fasteners over here, looks like 10mm. Get this off, then we're going to start pulling this intake off. Okay, the engine beauty cover is off. Let's work on getting the rest of this intake off. Start with electrical connections. You got a throttle body connection here. Release it from its retaining clips here. You got another electrical connection here. Looks like another electrical connection here. Manifold air pressure sensor. And then over here you have the purge solenoid for the evap system. After the electrical connections are out, I'll start working on the hoses. We'll pull off this evap hose here. And then we'll pull off this breather hose here. After that, then we'll start getting to the hardware. First thing I'll take off is this bracket. It's a 10 millimeter. It looks like 3 bolts on that. And then while I have the 10 millimeter out, I'll release these here up by the throttle body that goes to a support bracket underneath here. After those are out, then we'll pull all these intake bolts. Okay, I think there's like 7 of them. Once I get this all out, I'll count them and show you in more detail. Okay, that upper intake is off. Like I said, there's several bolts. Don't forget there's one way back in the cowling here. 8 millimeter to get that off. And like I said, all the lines and electrical connections are off. One thing I didn't mention is it's tough on this side. Looks like we got a EGR, I guess. It goes up around here. I ended up pulling that off because it sits over a bracket that I'm moving right here. And this bracket bolts to the side of the intake and keeps it on. So you got to at least get that bracket loose. There is a... this is gonna flip upside down on you. I'm sorry, it's just hard to see. But on the back side of the AC compressor here, right around here, there is a bolt that is T30. No, it's not T30. One second. It's T45. You get that bolt out, that one bolt just above the AC compressor there. It's kind of at an angle. And then that bracket will get loose, and then you can finagle the intake off. Okay, now let's get the lower intake off. There's several 8 millimeter bolts here. Don't be confused by these guys here. These are part of the fuel rail. Leave those on. Let's just unplug the fuel injectors on both sides and get all of these 8 millimeter guys off. I think there's 8 of them, 4 on this side and 4 on the other side. And the lower intake is off. Like I said, you got 8 bolts. Just count them: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 that you got to pull off of the cylinder heads there. And then the fuel injectors, you got to pull these red tabs back, press the black tab and pull these off. Very difficult. Recommend an AC pick to get down in there, get those off. And then in the back there are some wiring looms that are attached to it. But after you get that off, you can finagle it up and out. Okay, now I think what I'm going to do is go back here towards the front of the engine. I want to get a lot of this wiring, all this mess up and out of my way. So this harness that plugs in the ignition coils and the fuel injectors also has wires coming up to the front for, looks like maybe some cam position sensors, or maybe even some variable valve time actuation. Actually, these look like the variable valve time actuators in the back here. But anyway, there's stuff that is wired up in the front. I want to get it all unplugged and back. So we're going to pause, taking the top of the engine apart. Got to go back to the front here and get a lot of this stuff off. So I'm going to just start pulling brackets here. I'll pull the belt tensioner, get the rest of the belt off. And then I think I'll pull the rest of these coolant hoses. Now that I got all this stuff out of my way, up top here, I'm going to reach back here. I'm going to just start unplugging these coolant hoses back here, being careful not getting coolant in the cylinders here. Probably put a towel over here. I'll disconnect these coolant lines back here, and then down here and against the block, and get all these coolant hoses off. We'll get a lot more room here. I'll get back with you. Coolant hoses removed, electrical connections removed. We're getting a lot more room here. You can see I've got all the coolant hoses disconnected, got the brackets and the belt tensioner removed, unplugged all the stuff on front here, worked my way back along each coil pack along here, and then I just put all the wiring kind of together, cinched it together, and just kind of put it up and out of my way there. Now I think I can get the valve covers off, so I'm going to work on that. Looks like we got several bolts going on here. Looks like 8 millimeter. I'm going to get these valve covers off and I'll get back with you. Passenger side, the right hand side valve cover is off. Let me explain to you how to get this off. Here she is down on the ground. Take the variable valve timing actuators out first. You'll notice that they look different. This is the exhaust, this is the intake. T25 bolts, 3 of them on each one. Just pull those bolts and pop those out. Then you can take out the 8mm bolts going around the valve cover. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 of those. You will have a timing position sensor, cam timing sensor, position sensor. It goes right here. There's a T30 bolt. Pull that out. It's right here. And then in the back, this model has the twist-in PCV. So basically, while it's in here like this, you just twist it to the side and then pull out. And then you can pry the valve cover up. Once it's loose off of the cylinder head, you do have to finagle it, the top end up, and then kind of towards the back and then up. Let me show you why. This black piece back here has got an end on it that you can't see back here that catches on the valve cover. So make sure you push the valve cover towards the back a little bit and then up and then out. Kind of got to finagle that thing. All right, let's work on the driver's side. And here is the driver's side, left-hand side valve cover. Again, it's 12 bolts going around. Same thing, first off, you remove the variable valve time actuators out of the front of the valve cover. Then you can start getting into some of the bolts here. Again, 8mm, 12 of them, like I said. In the back, there is a little hole here where a wiring harness clips in. This is slightly harder than this side because there is an EGR cooler here. Let me explain that for a quick second. There is the EGR cooler up and out of the way. There's 2 bolts that hold it to basically what is the exhaust manifold, T45 or 13mm, dealer's choice on that. And then to get it up and out of the way, I had to disconnect it from the actual exhaust manifold right here. These are T45. You could use 13mm, but it's so tight in there, I recommend using a T45. Okay, the valve cover is off. Now, we need to work on getting this front timing cover off. There's a way to do the timing and even remove the cylinder heads without removing this, but it's kind of the cheapo way of doing it. We're going to remove this timing cover and take all these timing chains and cams off. So, I have set this thing to basically top dead center timing position. If you look on the driver's side, you can see an arrow here and an arrow here. They're pointing towards each other. And on the passenger side, I got these lines here pointing towards each other. And then down here, this is a 27mm bolt in here for the crankshaft. I did make myself just a little mark just so I know about where it needs to be. We're not going to really use that for timing, but just for my own benefit, I wanted to do that. So I'm going to get out the impact and zip this bolt out. Okay, the crank bolt and pulley are off. Once you get the bolt out, you can just, you don't need to pull the puller, or pull the pulley. It'll just slide right out. I will tell you that bolt is in there quite tight. You're going to need one heck of an impact. Most people don't have that. If you don't have that, I recommend getting 2 people, getting a band wrench around the crankshaft pulley. Have one person hold that while the other loosens the bolt. Anyway, that is done. Let's get the rest of this little junk off of here. I'm going to get this pulley off. It connects from the cylinder block to the cylinder head. That's going to definitely have to come off. I'm going to take the water pump off. This idler pulley also looks like the bolt goes through into the timing cover. So let me get this water pump off. I might even go ahead, just in case, take this thermostat housing out. You see all these bolts here, and it looks like a, well, you tell me what it looks like. I'm going to get that off, and then, like I said, the water pump, that pulley. And then what I'm going to do is get all these bolts out on the timing cover. Actually, there's a little bit of explanation with that. Let me get this little stuff off, and I'll get back with you. All right, all that stuff is off. Thermostat housing that is shaped like a...
Boys have a penis.
Yeah, and then the water pump is off. That pulley over here is off. And I've also pulled out all the rest of the bolts. So let me cover those for you. Don't forget this one over here in the corner. These are all 10 millimeter guys going around down here. Once you get down here, there's a 16 millimeter bolt I pulled out. And then going around this side, there is a 10 millimeter here, 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 and here. It looks like I've got all the bolts out of the front of this. Now, here is one good thing about this vehicle is the older versions of this 3.6, you actually had to pull the oil pan to get to these bottom bolts. On this one, these 5 bolts, I didn't have to. They're 13 millimeter, just right here going into the bottom of the timing cover. So that's good. This thing's glued on. I'm going to pry it off and show you the chains. Hey, it's on its way off, but I want to give you a quick tip. Let me grab this here. I recommend, this thing is really glued on. I recommend putting a 1 pry bar in here and simultaneously one in on this side over here and pushing on both of them at the same time, so you're pressing out here and here at the same time. Okay, we're really starting to see some guts now. That timing chain cover was quite the bear, just like a lot of things on this. Really glued on there. So not only was I prying from up top here, but as I was getting it off, it's glued on the bottom, of course, too. So there's a pry point here and over here. If you can fit a small pry bar in here or some kind of screwdriver or something to help yourself out, would be good. Okay, I don't know how people do this. It must be an older style of this engine. I don't know how people do this without removing the timing cover, because this thing has got a dowel pin on here down to the tensioner. So the head separates right here, of course, from the block. So how do you get the head off with this pinned on there? I don't know. Same thing here. This is bolted to the block here, but this is bolted to the cylinder head here. So at a minimum, you'd have to undo this bolt here. And similar on the other side. Maybe this cylinder head could come off without the timing cover because it's pinned down here, but again, your tensioner would expand. I don't know. This is the right way to do it, taking the timing cover off like I just showed you. Okay, I'm going to take the timing components off now. I'm going to start by removing these tensioners here and here and getting these tensioner rails out. And then I will unbolt the static guide, this one right here, on both sides. Get those out, and then I will take the chains off. Then after the chains are off, we'll work on getting the cams out, okay? Get right back with you. Mopar, in their infinite wisdom here on this side, you just can't get this thing off with the chain here, how it is. So I think this is meant for you to pull the oil control valves out of here and actually pull these off to get the rest of the chain off. I don't want to do that. These are already set. They're torqued down. I really just wanted to take the cam out. So that's what I'm going to do to get this chain off. I'm actually going to pull the caps here on this intake camshaft. I'm going to lift the camshaft up a little bit and down so I can get more slack on the chain to get this out. Alright, got the bulk of the timing components off. We'll have to mess with this sprocket later when we go to put it back together. Okay, you can see that the timing chains are off, and I've got the intake and the exhaust camshaft out on that side. Now I'm going to do the same thing on this side. These are T30 bolts. Just loosen them, crack them loose each one, and then slowly walk this thing up. Inevitably, there's going to be some lobes that are putting some tension on the springs for the valves, so just be careful. Just walk it up on both of them, and let's get these off. And the cams are out. We're getting there, folks. The AC compressor down here. I'm going to pull that off next. I don't know exactly how it comes off, but let me show you something here. Zooming in, I have unplugged it, the clutch right here, and then in the back there is another connection, touching it right there. And then I just pulled the wiring harness out of a hole here and like one more hole on the side. It looks like there's some 13 millimeter bolts, one here. There's one underneath right here, and then there's one further back that I've already got out right there. I believe it's just those three, but let me pull those off and see what I can do. The reason I unplugged it is because I want to, the way this thing sits, I want to pull it out, up, and then like set it down up here so it is just out of my way down here. Be right back. There's where the AC compressor was. There's where it now sits. I just finagled it behind these wires up and just set it down there. If you want to get it all the way out, like I did, One of these bolts, it's got like a E7 in female Torx on it that you're gonna have to actually pull the whole stud. It's this the lower stud here. Have to come all the way out. Last big things that need to come off on this thing are the exhaust manifolds. And this is like a newer style car that they're kind of building the manifold into the cylinder head. So we got 4 bolts, 10 millimeter, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that should come off. One of these on each side is going to be very difficult because it's underneath the bend here. I mean, I could just barely feel it with my finger back here. So that one's going to be difficult, but that's how I'm going to get them off. After that, it's just a few miscellaneous things. I got these actuators back here. I think I'm just going to unbolt them and let them hang back here instead of bringing them with the cylinder head. We'll just make sure that we've got everything in the back unbolted. I'll have to take a quick look back there and see what else we've got. And then we'll get into detorquing these cylinder heads. Let me get the exhaust manifolds off. Here we are underneath the car. I just want to give you a quick shot of this ridiculousness. This is the exhaust manifold on the passenger side. I have the wrench on the bolt. That's a 10 millimeter bolt there. So yeah, you're gonna have to use a wrench. The way this is gonna have to work is I'm gonna have to turn this out because there's not enough room. You see up there? I'm gonna have to turn this out as far as I can, then undo the other 3 and let this manifold come back off of the cylinder head just a little bit, and then finish this bolt off. Same thing on the driver's side. You can see the wrench that I have right there chilling on the 10 millimeter bolt. I did remove this pipe just to give myself some more room. There's like a 16 or a 15 millimeter bolt that holds it against the block. Anyway, again, just like an eighth of a turn at a time, get this out as far as I can, and then I will pull the other 3 bolts out, move this manifold off of the cylinder head, and finish getting this bolt out. Alright, I got all the bolts out of the exhaust manifold. Well, correction, I did not get this bolt out because you don't have to. This has just got a bracket on it that, sorry, it's hard to get up here. It's just got this bracket on it that goes around this lip of the exhaust manifold. So once you get this bolt loose, you know, a few turns, take the other 3 bolts out, and then you can get this manifold over that lip and then down. So this bolt and this bracket are going to just come out with the cylinder head. It's the same thing on the driver's side as well. Okay, I've removed the actuators in the back of the cylinder head here. Typically I unplug stuff, but some of these plugs are so brittle I don't want to break anything, so I literally just 10 millimeter bolts back there and pop those out. There's still some stuff attached to the cylinder heads in the back, but it's so hard for me to see and get to right now. What I'm going to end up doing is getting these cylinder heads loose, lifting them off just a little bit, pulling them forward, putting like a towel underneath there to protect the surface of the cylinder head so I can see what's back there to get it off the rest of the way. So for now, I'm going to show you detorquing these things. What you want to do is start on the outside, so these 2, then those 2, then these 2, then those 2. So start on the outside and work your way in. You'll see there's quite the breaker bar here. This is a 15 millimeter socket on here, and then I'm just going to pull, boom, pop loose. Okay, and then once you get them all loose, I typically just take a small impact and run the bolts out. Do that for all of them. I've already loosened this one. Do that for all of these on this side, and then we'll start lifting these cylinder heads off. So this is what I'm talking about. I just lifted the cylinder head off of the block high enough where I could fit a towel underneath it to protect the surface, and you see I've pulled it forward. So now I can get to the stuff in the back a little bit better. I'll disconnect the coolant temperature sensor, and I think there's some fir trees holding some wiring harness on back there. I'll just take a quick look, just get the rest of the stuff off in the back, and then lift this off and set it down, and do the same thing with this passenger side. Pop it up, get a towel underneath it to protect the surface, pull it forward, disconnect the stuff, and then lift it off and finally set it on the ground. Boom, success. Cylinder heads are off. In the back, there's a bunch of stuff you gotta disconnect. It's a coolant temperature sensor. There's the oxygen sensor plug. You could probably leave it connected and just snake it out of the piece that's holding it. There is a fir tree that is holding this onto the back of the cylinder head. And then, let's see, where is it? What did we do with it? There is a ground wire here, as well as another sensor here that bolt together with a 10mm bolt back of the cylinder head. That's this side. This side, once again, you got a, looks like a ground here with a sensor. Again, those go together with a 10mm bolt. And then there's this big block. This plastic holder holds a big piece of the wiring harness here. Get that undone, and then you'll be able to get the cylinder head off. I also should mention, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, you got to get the dipstick tube out. It bolts into the cylinder head on this side. And there is a grounding strap. There's a 13mm bolt on the side of the cylinder head. You got to get that off. Anyway, looking down here, here's the cylinder heads. And that, my friends, is the end of part 1. Stay tuned for part 2, where we clean the cylinder block, the cylinder heads, put new gaskets on, and build this thing back up. Thanks for watching. Please like, please subscribe. Put a comment down below if you think I'm an idiot and I should have done something better. I probably could have, because I didn't use any book to do this. I just did it. Anyway, catch you next time.